All right, let's do a Hulk Hogan WrestleMania tier list of all of the matches that the immortal, legendary Hulk Hogan participated in at WrestleMania. WrestleMania and Hulk Hogan are synonymous with each other. Hulk Hogan is the one who, well, he put WrestleMania on the map. Hulk Hogan, Vince McMahon, all of the golden era generation superstars were responsible for making WrestleMania what it is today and what it eventually evolved into. And Hulk Hogan was the main guy. He was the one who was unquestionably the leader of all of this and the one who helped push wrestling into the mainstream, helped make wrestling become um, a household thing. You know, people knew about the WWF, people knew about Hulk Hogan, people knew about WrestleMania, and Hulk Hogan was a massive, massive reason for this and for the success of the show. And so here I'm just going to rank Hulk Hogan's matches here at WrestleMania. The majority of these he main evented, so he was the ending match on the show. There are a few of these matches where he didn't close out the show, but nonetheless, we're going to just go over all of Hulk's matches, and I'm just going to rate where I think they should be in terms of their overall impact and overall performance. Hulk Hogan is obviously not the greatest technical wrestler in the world, nowhere near the greatest technical wrestler in the world, or of all time, really. But that's not what made Hogan successful. I mean, if you've watched wrestling throughout history, the 80s, 90s, Hulk Hogan used his charisma. He used his ability to connect with the audience as a way to get over and as a way to become a superstar and as a way to, be a main event performer. And so, Hulk's matches, although they're not, 5-star classics, they are still entertaining for what they are for the most part. It's an entertainment show, and it's a spectacle. And so, there are a handful of these matches that are actually pretty good, considering who was in the ring. So I'm going to try to start in order. These images are out of order, I can tell. So I'm going to try to start from WrestleMania 1 and just work my way up to his last match, which was WrestleMania 19. So WrestleMania 1. Okay, so here it was actually a tag team match. Hulk Hogan and Mr. T teamed up against Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. This was a big deal in terms of this main event. This was a really big deal. You had, this was the first WrestleMania. It was the first really big show that the WWF ever had in terms of, trying to reach a global audience. And this was a really big deal at the time. And the match itself, I thought, was pretty good. I don't think it was spectacular or anything like that, but I also don't think that it was anything bad. I thought that they told a decent story. And actually, I think what impressed me the most about this match was Mr. T's performance. I thought Mr. T did really good in the ring, considering that, he was a celebrity, an actor, but he really went in there and really held his own and actually looked pretty impressive in there. And what's interesting about that is, if he wanted to, I think he could have easily pursued a wrestling career because he looked pretty good in there. And I know that he was training for this quite a bit, and he took this very seriously, which was a good thing. So, but yeah, I thought this was a really, like I said, a good match. Not great, but not bad either. So I think this perfectly fits into the B tier. I'm going to do WrestleMania 2 next. So this was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy. And this was the main event. Of course, WrestleMania 2 was the famous 3-city venue show. where WrestleMania was held in 3 separate locations. So New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Um, Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy. This was actually in the steel cage, so the big old blue style cage. This was, I thought, another good, slightly above average match as well here. This one actually wasn't too bad. I mean, you had Hogan and Bundy going at it inside of a cage. I think this was the first time that they actually used the big blue cage. I could be wrong about that, but this was the first time I think that they used the cage, and I thought both guys put together, like I said, a pretty good average match. I mean, there was blood in here. Obviously, King Kong Bundy during the middle of the match took a pretty good blade job, and so we got some color. There was some decent psychology in the match. Guys trying to escape through the door. Bundy was trying to escape through the door a few times, and Hogan catches him and stops him, and then they just work the angle of trying to get out of the cage, and then Hogan eventually climbs out. I think I would put this. I think I'd put this in the B tier as well. I think again, this was a pretty average match. Again, not great, but not terrible either. So, I think that's where that one should kind of fit. All right, WrestleMania 3. Where is it? Here it is. What needs to be said about this match that hasn't already been said? This is the biggest main event in wrestling history, period. Hogan, Andre, the feud, the build up to this match was just absolutely legendary. You had Andre the Giant, who the WWF said hadn't been defeated in 15 years. Just an absolute monster, a legend in his own right, going up against Hulk Hogan, who is the up and coming star, the current star, and the current unbeatable champ. This match is a little tough to rate based off of 2 things. The first thing is the match itself. If you just look at the match, if you kind of step away from the spectacle of it, which is kind of hard to do, given that it's Hogan and Andre and it's at WrestleMania 3, Pontiac Silverdome, that crowd and everything. If you step back from the spectacle of it and you just look at the match itself, it's a bad match, right? Hogan and Andre. I mean, Andre couldn't move at this point. I mean, it was a really bad match, but you had 2 of the biggest stars ever, larger than life characters. Just the spectacle of seeing Hogan in those yellow trunks going up against Andre, who's now wearing the black wrestling gear, and who's now a heel, and he's aligned himself with Bobby the Brain Heenan and Hogan, and it just when you just look at that visual of Hogan, Andre, the crowd, and you got Gorilla Monsoon, Jesse Ventura in the booth, and just the anticipation of this match, and the biggest thing is that you didn't know who was going to win at that time, because wrestling was nothing like today. Wrestling was very protected back then, and you honestly didn't know if Hulk Hogan was going to win this match, because Andre the Giant was an absolute legend, and Andre the Giant was going to do what Andre the Giant wanted to do. If you listen to what everyone has said about Andre throughout the decades, he did what he wanted to do, and he wouldn't do anything that he didn't want to do. And so just all of that, when you factor in everything, just the spectacle, the hype, the builds, I think all of that outweighs the fact that the match quality was not good. But this match here, I mean, I can't do anything but put this in the S tier. Again, I'm not doing this because it was a technically, well performed wrestling match, because it wasn't. It was a bad wrestling match, air quotations. But the spectacle, Hogan, Andre, WrestleMania 3 for the championship, Pontiac Silverdome, all of that combined, I mean, this is just like this is a main event. This is a money-making main event. And because of that, this is S tier. WrestleMania 4 is next. And this one's interesting because this was the tournament show. So you had the tournament for the vacant WWF Championship. Now, of course, the belt was vacant because, after WrestleMania 3, you had the famous Saturday night main event episode where Hogan and Andre faced off against each other again. There was controversy with the referee, of course, the twin Hebner brothers. So, Andre ends up winning the belt and then ends up just giving it to Ted DiBiase. And the WWF wasn't having that. So they said, okay, we're going to vacate the belt. So the belt was just held vacant. And it was held vacant until WrestleMania 4, where they decided to have a big tournament for the belt. And so Hulk Hogan had a tournament match here with Andre the Giant. And this was essentially a rematch of WrestleMania 3. And it was nowhere near the WrestleMania 3 match. It was actually pretty disappointing, to be honest. The match really had nothing to it. It didn't have the feel of WrestleMania 3. It didn't have the build-up of WrestleMania 3. It just didn't have any of those. And when you take all of that away, then the bad match really does come out and expose itself. And unfortunately, that's what happened here. It was not a good match. And on top of that, the finish was extremely poor as well. I mean, both guys ended up having a double disqualification. Hogan hits Andre with the chair, and then Andre hits Hogan back with the chair. So just the ending itself was really bad. And unfortunately, it was just nowhere near the WrestleMania 3 match. I would actually put this in D. And I'm a huge Hogan fan, love Andre, but this was really disappointing. And considering this was the follow-up to WrestleMania 3, yeah, D tier. The next year would be WrestleMania 5. So this would be a big one. So this would be a huge bounce back for Hogan in terms of his WrestleMania matches, I should say. This would be the year that the Mega Powers explode, and you would have Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage in the main event at WrestleMania 5. I don't know if there's a better storyline build up to this match in wrestling history. Maybe Hogan Andre, actually, the one we just covered, WrestleMania 3. But this storyline was absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. I mean, the way that they played off this storyline of the Mega Powers and Hogan and Savage becoming friends and really becoming this really good tag team, this unstoppable force. And then all of a sudden you have Randy Savage just saying the hell with it out of jealousy, breaking up with Hogan and starting this feud and then starting this match at WrestleMania 5 for the WWF Championship with Liz in a neutral corner. This was fantastic stuff. I thought the match itself was actually really good. I thought that both guys worked with each other really well. And I thought that it was a really, really good WrestleMania match. It was a really good WrestleMania main event. The only thing is, I wish this did have a bigger venue attached to it. This did take place at the Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, which is where the previous WrestleMania was as well. So, it didn't really have that big time show feel like a WrestleMania 3 or WrestleMania 6, but nonetheless, this was a great feud and actually a really, really good match. And so, credit to both guys for putting on a hell of a match. I'd put this in the A tier. I don't think it's S just because of, just because of that venue. I don't know. There's something about that venue that just kind of didn't didn't give this match a bigger feel than it really deserved. So unfortunately, I think I'm just going to put this in the A tier. But this was fantastic, and this was a great match. The next one is Hogan versus Warrior, WrestleMania 6. Um, Toronto, Canada, Sky Dome, Hogan Warrior, belt versus belt. Like WrestleMania 3, this was absolutely huge. And I think this was Hogan's second biggest main event at WrestleMania of all time. Hulk Hogan was obviously huge. I mean, he was the biggest star in wrestling, but the Ultimate Warrior and his rise throughout the late 80s to up until this point in 1990 was absolutely huge. I mean, Ultimate Warrior was becoming and was an absolute star in his own right. He was massively over. I mean, there were a lot of fans who became fans of the Ultimate Warrior, and even Hogan fans who were becoming fans of the Ultimate Warrior. And you had this kind of back and forth between, who was better? Was it Hulk Hogan? Was it the Ultimate Warrior? People were torn about this. And they were going into this match both as baby faces, Hulk Hogan obviously as a baby face, and the Ultimate Warrior as a baby face. And this match really had everything that Hogan and Andre had at WrestleMania 3. This match had incredible build-up, incredible hype. You had two mega stars going up against each other. You had the belt versus belt element, which I believe was the first time that this happened in WWF history, where the Intercontinental Champion is going up against the WWF Champion. So that was huge. The venue, Toronto, Sky Dome, I mean, absolutely crazy. The fans were insane, going crazy for this match. This is an S tier match. This is S tier. This was just legendary stuff. And I think up until this point, this was Hulk Hogan's best in-ring match that he's had at WrestleMania. By far, actually. I think this was a really, really good match itself. Again, if you take a step back from the spectacle of it all, these two actually had a really good match. Like, they told a really good story in the ring, and it was a really entertaining match. And so that's where I'd put it. S tier, absolutely. Hogan versus Warrior. What followed that was the WrestleMania 7 main event, which had Hulk Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter. And this one to me was one of the weaker builds as far as a storyline goes. I mean, it was kind of lazy if you ask me, because this was the whole Sergeant Slaughter turning his back on America storyline, versus Hogan, who became naturally the American hero here. So it was, they essentially made a storyline based off of the war at the time, and I don't know. To me, it was just kind of lazy booking, and it was just kind of a way for the WWF to take advantage of some current events at the time and just kind of blend that into a storyline. I thought Sergeant Slaughter was Hogan's weakest WrestleMania opponent by far. Sergeant Slaughter just doesn't compare to some of the legends that he's gone up against. Actually, nowhere close. I mean, no disrespect to Sergeant Slaughter, but he's not Andre the Giant or the Ultimate Warrior or Randy Savage. So yeah, this one here was it was okay. I mean, the actual match itself was actually okay. It wasn't bad or anything. It's just like I said, the build of it, I didn't particularly care about, and I thought this was kind of one of the weaker opponents that Hogan went up against during this time. And again, I just thought that the whole war thing was lazy, and I didn't like Slaughter as champion, at least not during this time, or this period. So But the match itself was okay. But just given all of those factors combined, I'd probably have this in the C tier. Just based off of that fact. So, all right, WrestleMania 8, Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice, and yeah, this one's kind of like WrestleMania 7. Actually, I didn't really care for this build either. In my opinion, I think this is one of Hogan's more forgettable main events that he's had at WrestleMania. I don't even remember much of the builds between these two. And I just remember that it was just kind of a, I don't know, it was just kind of a weird main event, to be honest with you. This is of course the WrestleMania where they could have done Hogan versus Flair, but they didn't do that, and they went with Sid Justice here. To me, this is just a very forgettable main event. It's definitely not one of Hogan's classics, and I thought the match was actually not very good, to be honest. I'm debating between the C and D tier, but um, I'd probably put this in the C tier, just because I thought that the match was okay, but yeah, very very forgettable WrestleMania main event for sure. Um, all right, so WrestleMania 9. So Hogan actually did have. I was looking at this picture, Hogan and Yoko, which we'll get to in a second. But Hogan actually did have a tag match on this show. So he teamed up with Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus Ted DiBiase and IRS, who were called Money Inc. at the time. Um, Not a good match. Not a good match. Was it the worst match ever? No, but I don't know. This whole program here was just part of that WrestleMania 9 era, and obviously WrestleMania 9 is one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, one of the worst pay-per-views of all time. So, this match really did nothing for me personally. I thought it was I didn't think it was terrible, but it was not great either. I think it's somewhat watchable if you haven't seen it ever or haven't seen it in a very very long time. But yeah, just not a very memorable match, and not a really significant match, to be honest either. Just a kind of a filler match, to be honest with you. But I'd put it in the C tier just because I don't think it was absolutely terrible. Hogan and Yoko, D tier. It wasn't even a match really, but it still technically counted as a match. But yeah, I mean it's D tier. It was like what, 5 second match. Hogan drops the leg on Yoko, was the belt. So yeah. All right. So WrestleMania 1 to 9 was really the prime of Hulk Hogan, and then Hulk Hogan essentially leaves the WWF in 1993. And it wasn't until 2002 that Hulk Hogan actually comes back to the WWF, and Hulk Hogan makes his return at WrestleMania against The Rock at WrestleMania 18. This match ended up being an all-time classic. There's no question about this. I'll be honest, I think the build and leading up to this match, it wasn't anything legendary like the Hogan and Andre build, or the Hogan and Warrior build, or the Hogan and Savage build. But what made this match legendary and iconic was when the bell rang and the two guys were standing across each other, and you just felt that energy. You felt the audience's passion at this point. You had Hogan staring off against The Rock, and the fans were just going absolutely insane, just going completely crazy for The Rock, who at the time was a huge star in 2002. And the big thing was Hulk Hogan returning back to the WWF, which was a big, big deal because it was the first time that Hogan had been back at WrestleMania in 9 years. And he's going up against The Rock, one of the biggest stars on the planet. And these two guys just tore the house down in an absolute classic match that, I mean, both guys did a phenomenal job playing up to the crowd. They knew exactly what to do at the right time. Just the timing, the cadence, just everything that Hogan and Rock did. It was just so professional. And this was a classic match. And this match absolutely took over WrestleMania 18. And what's crazy is that this match wasn't even the main event. Triple H versus Chris Jericho was the main event that nobody really cared about after this match. So yeah, these guys tore it down. And just based off of that, I mean, this is S tier without question. This is an S tier match. This is Hulk Hogan and The Rock, two legends, putting on a hell of a match as far as in-ring goes. The spectacle, again, the crowd, the audience, just everything that you would expect. This was a really good match. And then we have the last match that Hogan has ever had at WrestleMania, which was WrestleMania 19. And Hulk Hogan went up against Vince McMahon. And what I actually thought was, I was pretty hyped for this match, actually. I thought that the way that they played this match off was unbelievable. I mean, you had Hogan, who was like, the guy in the WWF throughout all of the early years of WrestleMania, who quote unquote made WrestleMania versus the creator of WrestleMania, right? Vince McMahon was the brains behind it all. And so, they played off of this storyline and this angle of, okay, who created WrestleMania? Who was responsible for this? Was it more Hogan or more McMahon? And the two just had chemistry. The two just knew each other so well, obviously. So again, I thought the buildup was great, and I also thought the match was pretty fun. I thought it was a pretty fun match. Was it one of Hogan's best? No. Am I going to put it in the S tier? Absolutely not. But I thought it was a really entertaining match, actually, and I thought, given these two guys and how old they were at the time and everything, I thought they really put a pretty good performance here, and actually enjoyed this match. I thought the surprise of Roddy Piper coming at the end was pretty cool too, and I thought that was a pretty cool playback. So again, this match, entertaining, fun. I think it's a B tier, to be honest. I think it's a B tier match. And yeah, so this is kind of where I'm at here. So obviously, Hogan and Andre, Hogan and Warrior, Hogan and Rock are absolute, gems, absolute classics. Hogan Savage was absolutely huge. I would put it just a peg lower than these three, just because of that venue. I thought that venue just didn't do it any justice. And then you have your average matches here: Hogan and T versus Orndorff and Piper, Hogan versus Bundy, Hogan versus McMahon. The C tier: Hogan versus Slaughter, Hogan versus Justice, and the tag match of Hogan and Beefcake versus Money Inc. And then you have your duds, which were Hogan and Andre at WrestleMania 4 and Hogan and Yoko at WrestleMania 9. So, Hulk Hogan has had obviously a huge WrestleMania career. And I think that these are kind of where I would place his matches. And it's really interesting to see that this is kind of the way that it's been for him. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys think that this list makes sense, if this is kind of where you guys would rank his matches, and let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. I appreciate you guys watching, and stay tuned for the next one.